All right, we've got a brief introduction to the Pitts S2C cockpit. I'd like to start with the throttle here on the left-hand side. We typically fly this with our left hand, and we use the button on the end there to transmit and to talk to whatever radio we have selected. It's only a single radio, so it's just a push to talk there. Straight above that is our prop control. This allows us to adjust our the speed of the propeller. Below that is the mixture control. This is how we adjust our mixture of our engine. Typically we move it to position and we freeze it, and then it's got a really nice friction lock. Coming straight up from there, we've got our ignition. This selects the right mag, left mag, or both. In flight we typically run it in both, but for now we'll leave it off. Next gauge is the altimeter. It shows our height above mean sea level. The next gauge over is our compass. It shows us our heading based on magnetic headings. To the right of that is our manifold pressure, which measures our horsepower essentially. In the top right now it's just reading barometric outside air pressure, which is 3000 roughly. Below that is our fuel flow gauge. It reads how many gallons per hour we're actually burning in flight. The Pitts typically burns about 15 to 20 gallons an hour depending on the power setting. Next one over is the CHT, cylinder head temperature, and also the exhaust gas temperature. It's a dual purpose gauge. And below that, to the right, is our RPM and takt time. It's reading the actual speed of the propeller. And next gauge over, I'll turn it on for you with the master switch, is our fuel totalizer. It shows how many gallons are remaining in the main tank, which is a 23-gallon tank. Right now we've got about 17 gallons in there. Next gauge over is our oil pressure gauge and our oil temperature gauge. Oil pressure always remains in the green, between 60 and 80. And below that, oil temperature, we typically run it in around the 200 range. And we can cool the oil temperature with our cowl flap, which is below my left knee. To the next gauge over is our voltmeter and our amp meter. Could read how many volts we're producing right now out of the battery, which is about 12.4. It's a 12-volt system, so that's a good number. Right above that is our G meter. It shows right now about 3.4 Gs and about -1.5. That shows what we did on the last flight, and we can zero that by pressing this little button right here. Next gauge over is our airspeed. We usually use the outer scale in the Pitts. We usually fly it somewhere between 60 and 200 miles an hour, and we usually read it in the miles per hour. Next gauge over is our fuel burn and fuel remaining gauge. We reset it each time to, when we top the airplane, to 23 gallons, and then it measures the amount of fuel we're burning out of it using the fuel flow to measure how many gallons are remaining. This is actually a very accurate gauge. Below that, we've got avionics master. I'm going to turn that on for you. We'll power up our radio. Next gauge over is a smoke. Turn that on and off to turn the smoke system on and off. Next switch over is our boost pump. Turn that on if we need to increase our fuel pressure. Turn that on for an auxiliary boost pump. Next switch over is the alternator switch. That's how we turn the alternator field switch on and off to charge our battery. The rest of these are just circuit breakers. The last one on the right, what we've done is we've made it the stall warning breaker, so we can pull it so we don't have to listen to the stall warning during the aerobatics. But for takeoff and landing, that's always pressed in. Below that, we've got our stick. That's how we control the airplane primarily. Basic stick. And we'll move that out of the way. We've got our radio. This is a NavCom. We have a GPS and a comm radio in there as well. Below that is our transponder. Tells the controller what our altitude is. Right now we're at 0, so it's reading accurately. Below that is our intercom system. Got the volume control here on the left for the back seat, and the right one is the volume control for the guy in the front seat. Squelches on the outside. That's a basic overview of the Pitts S2C cockpit, and we hope you enjoyed our little demo.